What about overall thoughts on the movie itself? Like any things maybe from the beginning of the movie that you'll notice?
Well, as far as the movie goes, I mean, it's basically 2 hours of spectacle. It's 2 hours of CGI. It's 2 hours of Iron Man versus Godzilla.
Yes.
Battling it out and fighting. And so I think in a lot of ways this was definitely directed at a younger audience. Just because the acting is pretty bad. I mean, I'm not sure if you picked up on that, but the script and the acting is not A grade stuff. It's
well, like you said, it's bright colors, bright colors, fast action, lots of flashing and all that. Yeah.
So, I mean, the script and the acting definitely came in second to the CGI on this one. Yeah. There's no doubt about that. And so for that reason, it's kind of like Transformers. It's directed at either people who are, at least marketed to people who are either fans of the whole kaiju genre. The whole. Sort of Godzilla monster genre, and also you sort of younger demographics, younger audiences who maybe are not so interested in plot lines and devices and any sort of not interested in analyzing themes, but are quite happy to sit back for 2 hours and just be entertained by massive robots fighting in the ocean.
Like the typical like young boy who plays video games when
exactly. And and there's a whole lot of ideas that tie into that as well, relating to the promotion of military-industrial organizations and the role of the military-industrial complex in society as well.
Absolutely.
But I'm sure we'll get into that later on.
Well, one thing I wanted to point out was the very beginning of the movie starts out as some other movies like to do, with just a blank title screen, white titles, black background, and the titles are Jaeger. So it gives you the definition of this term Jaeger, which is a German word which means hunter. And then it gives you a second definition for a second term being kaiju, which is a Japanese word which means monster or strange creature. And as you said, it's actually a genre of movies in Japan, kaiju movies being Godzilla movies with monsters. That's what a kaiju means. So a German word, Japanese word, that are important within the movie pop up on the screen. I thought it was interesting that they did that, actually.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the reasoning behind that is. I mean, I know we talked about it briefly the other day. If you think back to the Second World War, I mean, the two major powers that the Western Alliance and Russia were fighting were Germany and Japan.
Exactly. It definitely, to me, it definitely brought that up. Just like the thought, just a little glimpse of the Second World War. Not that they're really even going anywhere with it, but it just.
I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means, but that's what I thought as well when I saw those, two words and thought about what significance might be there. So, I mean, people can think about that, and if maybe there's some other connection we haven't thought of, ourselves. But
the whole movie in general is definitely promoting globalization, globalism, what have you, and the whole World War, everything about World War ties right into that. Yeah.
Well, the whole Third World War scenario, that's what it really is. I mean, the first, as you say, you've got the intro where you've got this blank screen, and then these two definitions pop up of, the last two major aggressors in the last major World War, in terms of dialectical, confrontation. The next sort of 5 to 10 minutes of the film are basically one of the main characters narrating the background of the story to bring you up to speed to where the film starts off, and he basically talks about how, the first kaiju, turned up when he was 5 years old, and then the second one turned up, and then blah, 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 blah. They kept coming, and then he talks about how the world came together, and we had to put old rivalries aside, and we pooled our resources, and we established a global government, and we established this kind of this kaiju program, which is basically, it's kind of like, it's not really the bureaucratic structure under which the Jaeger program is run is not really kind of expanded upon in the film, but it's basically kind of like I kind of see that as like an allegory for NATO under a world government.
Something like that for sure.
It's kind of like half corporate, half public sector, half it's basically like a military industrial group that's run by a global government in order to face a global threat, which of course is a very common theme, in terms of the world coming together for a greater good, which
exactly. They're coming together against a common enemy, which is
exactly. Just like the Club of Rome said, in their book, obviously there was a different context altogether, but the theme is the same. It's the idea that we must all come together, and we must put, rivalries aside. We must all pool our resources. We must all be one in order to face a common threat.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that idea is a big theme, a big push in the movie, obviously. And the common enemy here is another alien sort of enemy. This alien ends up coming from out of the depths of the ocean too. So there's some symbolic things going on with that. But it's very similar to the aliens coming out of the sky, whether they're coming out of the sky or they're coming out of the bottom of the ocean. Those are two worlds where human life doesn't exist. So it's just, that foreign threat that goes beyond another nation.
It's the foreign threat. Yeah. It's the threat from outside. It's a threat that we all have to face together. It's the threat that concerns us all, and therefore, the obvious answer is that we must all come together to face the threat together.
It's interesting to think before any sort of international organization exists, the outside threat is just other nations. That's what it has been historically up to this point. But if you get an international organization, then what is that threat? Because that threat is used a lot of times to bring cohesion to society and actually give them purpose and get economies rolling and things like that often.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, and in the world of Pacific Rim, there would have been a massive expansion of the military-industrial complex, in order to build these machines, So, you've got that element right there. These are huge, technologically advanced, like Iron Man type things, but that are controlled by two people using a neural interface, and that's a whole other.
Yes.
Well,
should we just jump into that? Because we're talking about the same old thing again, the whole transhuman concept and the promotion of transhuman ideas. Yeah.
So basically what we've got here is we've got this military industrial organization, something like NATO, maybe more corporate. But unspecified, at least in the film, as to what its bureaucratic structure and mandate is. But apart from protecting the world's biggest cities from these monsters, So what we've got obviously is we've got these big sort of like Iron Man type machines, these huge robots, right? Which are like 100, 200 feet tall. Who knows? They're massive, big robots, which are controlled not by one person but by two people. And in the sort of beginning narrative of the film, the lead protagonist explains that what they tried to use was what he describes as old DARPA tech, like for stealth fighters, which was actually mentioned in the NBIC report back in 2001, where they talked about how they would link the fighters, the pilot's brain directly into the plane, so he could fly with his brain. He basically refers to that technology, and says that they found that, the whole idea didn't work because the human brain wasn't really capable of just connecting to one machine. It had to be connected, to another person, and there had to be some kind of hive or some kind of meld going on in order for the human brain or a set of human brains to fully control, such a big machine. And so that's what you've got in the film Pacific Rim. You've got this huge kind of like robot figure, not with one person in it, but with two people in it. And these two people who control the machine, by, they're wearing exoskeletons which are connected to the mechanics of the machine. So if they move their right arm, the robot's arm moves. Mm-hmm. If they move their left leg, the robot's leg moves, etc. Mm-hmm. But you've got these two people instead of one who are both connected by what they call a neural link. And so they've both got obviously a chip embedded somewhere in the head, or some kind of brain-machine interface in the suit that they wear when they're in these things. And what they do is they do this thing called a neural handshake, where they literally become mind-melded. So you have these two operators of the machine melding into one another's minds and sort of becoming one mind, mm-hmm. and fighting the kaijus that way. And so that's a whole can of worms, that topic there, because, basically they're referring to technology that has actually already been developed, mm-hmm. And that has been talked about, funnily enough, by Japanese scientists. Who wrote the post-publication report for the NBIC conference back in 2001, where they were talking about, the next sort of few decades of development of converging technologies. But I digress. Basically, you've got the idea of a mind meld being presented as basically the only viable way for a brain-machine interface to work, and this whole idea is constant throughout the entire film in so many different ways. And it's not just the humans that are mind melding with one another in order to control these machines, but we actually find out later on in the film that the actual kaijus, the big monsters, the threat themselves, they also operate on a hive mind system as well. And so they're all kind of, like the Borg in Star Trek, they're operating from some central source somewhere. They're getting, they're all connected into one central kind of computer base or computer database, or some, central point of sort of reference, So this is a common theme that comes up again and again in the film, is the idea of linking minds, of melding minds, and of the technology that's used to do so. Yeah. And so it's almost like you've got the idea of the enemy, the threat being of a hive mind mentality. But again, the only way to fight the threat is to use a hive mind system. That's typical, especially with the AI themed films. It's always like, there's this horrible AI. The only thing that can fight it is another AI that's even stronger. Exactly. Yeah. And we talked about that in like our previous ones. We were talking about Cloud Atlas and the Matrix and the Wachowskis, where the common thread which comes up again and again is that, in order to beat the system, you have to become one with the system, like in the Matrix. Yeah. The only way to take down the Matrix is to plug into the Matrix, So it's kind of like the same theme coming up again, where you've got this hive mind alien species who are invading the planet. But the only way that we can fight them is to actually start, creating hive minds of our own and mind melds of our own. And there's a very, very important concept, and one of the most significant concept within the whole transhuman arena, as far as I'm concerned, at least. Well, fighting fire with fire, it's that whole idea for sure. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely in there. Yeah. So, the relationship between man and machine is very important to note here. You've got the typical transhuman idea of man blending with technology to become this new cyborg enhanced man. But beyond just the link between man and machine, we also have man, machine, and the mind and even spirit of man being imbued into the machine, because that's the way in which that the machine is actually controlled. And the movie works in such a way in that the machine has to be controlled, and it only is controlled when there's a hive mind element to it. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, that's obvious that they're
they're throwing in all these separate concepts and jumbling all together on purpose, because they wouldn't have to do that. It could just be like these people controlling the machine inside, and no need for the mind meld. But all these transhuman ideas, they all do connect, and so it's definitely showing that. And I have to say that was done on purpose, the whole promotion of the hive mind.